In this week's Torah portion, we learn about the service that was performed once a year on the holiest day of the year, on Yom Kippur, by the high priest, the Kohen Gadol. One of the highlights of that service was the selection of the two goats. Two identical goats would be brought to the high priest, identical in height, in appearance, and in value. He'd have a box with two lots in it. One of the lots had written on it, Seir LeHashem, the goat for God. The other one said, Seir LeAzazel, the goat for Azazel. He'd pick each of the lots out of the box, put one on the head of the goat in front of him to the right, and one on the head on the goat in front of him to the left. The goat that was marked for God would be taken by the high priest into the tabernacle, or later when the temple stood into the holy temple, and it would be sacrificed by the high priest as part of the Yom Kippur service. The other goat that was standing at the threshold looking into the entrance of the tabernacle, the Mishkan, or the temple, would be turned around and led by a man designated for the purpose out into the wilderness to a rocky, steep cliff outside civilization. It would be thrown by that man off the top of the cliff. I saw a great explanation of this service from one of the commentators. He explains that it's a metaphor. It's a metaphor for us, because each of us has a choice to make. We could choose to be the Seir to God, the goat to God. We could turn our backs on our animalistic desires, sublimate them, and say, no, I'm not going to give in to temptation because God told me not to. And if you do that, you enter the temple. You're welcomed with open arms by God. Or we could turn our backs on God, looking into that entrance to the temple and turning around and walking the other way, saying, no, God, I'm going to give in to my animalistic desires. It's not an accident that in this week's Torah portion, we also learn the details about the forbidden physical relationships. If we give in to them, we're like that other goat, the one that goes out to Azazel, that rocky cliff. We leave the reservation. We leave civilization. We go to a cold, dark, and lonely place when we give in to our forbidden desires. We throw ourselves off of a cliff. And maybe that's why we learn about this service this time of year rather than closer to Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur comes at the end of the year. It's a special gift from God. He allows us to beg for another year's lease on life, notwithstanding our transgressions from the prior year. But learning about this service now reminds us that we have that choice to make year-round. And it reminds us that notwithstanding our differences, we really are identical. Notwithstanding how different we may look in appearance, or our different levels of wealth, or social status or standing, we all have an identical choice to make. Are we going to choose to be the goat for God or for Azazel? Are we going to stop kidding ourselves and everyone else by claiming that we're too weak or lame or lazy or foolish to be able to resist temptation?
Man, is there Hockney? Why me? I'm stupid. I'm a cripple. Why me?
Because you're a cripple, Verbal. Because you're stupid. Because you're weaker than them.
Or are we going to stand up and walk straight, walk in the footprints of God as the Seir LeHashem, the goat to God?
I know you know something. I know you're not
So why
telling
don't you
me
say something?
I'm smarter than you. And I'm going to find out what I want to know, whether you like it or not.
To a cop, the explanation is never that
You know what I'm getting at, Verbal, the truth!
Come on,
There's
Verbal.
no
Who do you think
mystery
you're
in the
talking
street,
to?
no arch
I know
criminal,
you know
nothing at all.
Somebody with power.
There was a
Somebody who
lawyer.
was capable of tracking us from New York to Los Angeles.
It's Kaiser Soze. You think a guy
Kaiser
like that
Soze.
is this close to getting caught and sticks his head out?
You get no advice from me. Because you're stupid, Verbal. Because you're a cripple.
What I want to know is who's the gimp.
Kaiser
How do I know
Soze.
that? If he comes up for
Who's
anything,
Kaiser
he's going
Soze?
to get rid of me. But I'm sure Keaton is dead.
I can't feel my legs, Kaiser.